What's up, programmer? In this video, I am going to explain constructors in C++ programming. So, what are constructors? Constructors are a special method that is called automatically when an object is created. The purpose of constructors is to initialize the object's data values. Constructors have the same name as the object class, and they also don't have a return type. Now I'm going to show you how to use constructors in C++ programming. Now, in order to create a constructor, we first need to create a class. To create a class, we will type the class keyword and then followed by a name for the class. Then after the name, we will put the curly brackets. Now inside the class, we need to put an access specifier called public for the constructor. The reason why you need to put the public keyword is that the constructor needs to be public so that you can access the constructor from the main function. Now here's where we create a constructor. To create a constructor, we just need to type the name of the class. In this example, it is called example of class. Then once you have the name, just put the two parentheses and then put the curly brackets again, and there we go. We just created a basic constructor in our class. Now this constructor that we just created, it doesn't take any arguments and there is no constructor code. However, you can add code to initialize the object's data values. For example, let's say you have a class that is for a coordinate point, such as an algebra class. So for this next example, I'm going to create another class, and for this class, I'm going to call it point. Now in this class called point, I am going to create two constructors. Before I create the next constructor, I am going to put the other access specifier called private. Now private is basically the opposite of public. For the most part, when you create a class, if you need variables or any data values to be stored in a class, you want to store it in the private access specifier. So I am just going to create two variables in a class called point, and then in the first constructor, I'm going to initialize these two variables to be 0. Now for the next constructor, I'm going to have two arguments in the parentheses. One is for the x coordinate and the other is for the y coordinate, and then I'm going to set the variables to be equal to the two arguments. So this class that we just created has two constructors. The first constructor initializes the x and the y coordinates to 0, and the second constructor takes the two arguments to initialize the x and the y variables to the specific values. Now if you want to create an object using a constructor, you can do so by creating a variable that is the same class type. For this class, it is called point. When you create an object, the constructor is called. In the first line, the default constructor is called and the object is created where the x and y variables is set to 0. In the second line, the second constructor is called and the object is created where the x variable is going to be set to 3 and the y variable is going to be set to 4. Now if you want to create an object for your class and you don't have any constructors created, then C++ will automatically create a default constructor for your class. I'm just going to remove the constructor for the first class that we created. So basically, if I were to create a class object for this class, C++ will create a default constructor, and that default constructor will do nothing, but it can be kind of useful if, let's say for example, you want to create objects without specifying any initial values. Now another type of constructor that you can create is called a copy constructor. Copy constructor is used to create a new object that is going to be a copy of an existing object. So for the class called point, I am going to create a copy constructor. In the argument for this constructor, I'm going to have it be the same as the class name, and then inside of this constructor, I'm going to have the x variable be equal to that point object's x value, and then for the y variable, I'm going to set it equal to the point object's y value. So now we have a copy constructor that is created, and basically this copy constructor will copy the data values of the other object to the new object that you created. So constructors is a very important concept that you need to understand, especially when you're going to create classes and use class objects. This is a beginner's tutorial to constructors in C++ programming. This is easy syntax, and I hope you enjoyed the video.